Welcome to Heresy, the Horus Heresy talk show. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Dark Angels, the first Legion, and the Legion with the most pages dedicated to them in any of the Horus Heresy books so far. We're going to be talking about their Legion traits and their advanced reaction, their Warlord traits, and also going through the weapons and special character that's available in their armory as well. But before we do that, if you enjoy the content, please do drop me a like and a subscribe. It would mean a lot. And if there is anything in the video that you'd like to discuss or any feedback you'd like to leave me, please drop a comment down below. And now on with the show. So Dark Angels have a pretty complex Legion trait called Hexagrammaton. So what this does is there are 6 different wings in the Dark Angels, and each one of them has a slightly different bonus. And you choose when you're creating your list which wing each unit belongs to, and hence which bonus it can get in game. If a unit's got access to more than one bonus, so for example, if they're joined by an independent character from a different wing, they can pick at the start of the turn which rules they're going to use, which is kind of a cool interaction for some of these. The traits vary in power, but there is something that is applicable for most units, making this overall much better a trait than it might seem. Most of the traits are slightly weaker versions of other Legions rules, generally in terms of power level, but the fact that different units can have one that is specifically good for them actually makes this much more than the sum of its parts. So, some of the particularly good ones, the Death Wing get +1 to hit with swords. Now, I think this was the Dark Angel's old Legion trait in Horus Heresy 1, which has been expanded on. But in this edition, because of the power level of the swords they have access to, this is actually super powerful. And this itself probably could have still been the Legion trait on its own, and it would have been a great Legion trait. So this is super good. All swords of all kinds. Also, the Iron Wing get rerolls of 1s to hit with shooting versus vehicles, which is good. So this is what you would put on your shooting units, maybe your las cannons or any other anti-tank units, specifically good for them. The Fire Wing get +1 to wound versus units with an independent character in. Now, I've not played against this, but I've played against Alpha Legion, who get preferred enemy in the same way against units with an independent character in, and let me tell you, it's really good and really easy to find ways to use that on the battlefield. So this is actually a really good trait as well. Dreadwing, -1 strength versus some common weapons, Volkite, Plasma, Flame, is actually not bad either if you've got a unit specifically that you just want to make a bit tougher to kill with those things. For example, Dreadnoughts, -1 strength when shooting at Dreadnoughts with Plasma is also good, and particularly since none of the other traits are particularly that great on Dreadnoughts either. Stormwing gives you +1 to hit with some of the lesser bolt weapons, but that does include bolters. And +1 to hit with bolters is pretty good if you use Tactical Marines, because Tactical Marines putting out a lot of bolt shots is good. It's pretty decent, so this is also good as well. So overall, this Legion trait, very flexible, lets you get the right stuff in the right places, and the +1 to hit with swords in particular is very applicable to some of the things that Dark Angels do best. Then we've got their advanced reaction. So this is called the Angels of Death, very appropriately. So it's a reaction to an enemy charging you, and you take a leadership test. If you pass it, you gain Fearless and Fear 2. If you fail, you gain Stubborn and Fear 1. Either way, it makes a combat more decisive when you win, and it makes you less likely to flee if you lose. But overall, that's pretty weak really as Legion advanced reactions go, because it's only when the enemy charges you, and it's only going to have an effect dependent on what happens as well. You know, if you're Fearless or Stubborn, you might have had that already with some units, which means this is kind of pointless. Fear 1 and Fear 2 makes people more likely to lose if they charge you, more likely to fail if they charge you and lose, but most people won't put themselves in situations where that's going to happen. It's very situational, for this to actually do something, and it's got a leadership test involved, and I think overall this is probably one of the worst Legion reactions that are available, and a lot of the time I think you would probably just be rather using the -1 attacks on the enemy or overwatching them probably instead of this one. So I don't think it's pretty good. So the Dark Angels have not done very well out of this one. And similarly with Warlord traits, so Dark Angels have only got 2 Warlord traits, and one of them is actually quite restrictive. So Marshal of the Crown is +1 leadership to anything with the same Hexagrammaton trait as your Warlord, which is kind of good if you're focusing on one hexagrammaton. If you're playing a narratively based army where you're all using the same one, maybe, it'll be quite good. +1 leadership for things in line of sight, not with a restricted range, like some Warlord Traits, is also really powerful. And you do get a reaction according to your hexagrammaton choice as well. So depending on what hexagrammaton you've picked, that could be, the reaction that you really want access to as well. So this is potentially good. On the downside, if you're playing mixed hexagrammatons to really get use out of those different things being in the right place, this can actually do very little as well. So it is a good trait. It does have potential, but depending on what you're building in your army, it might not be good sometimes. Then we've got Seneschal of the Keys. So for this, you select a faction, and the Warlord's unit gets +1 weapon skill and ballistic skill against that faction. Now, the problem with this is it doesn't say that you pick it when the game starts. So you're picking it on your army list. And so if you're going to events, or if you're not list tailoring against an opponent, the likelihood that you're going to come up against a specific legion you've picked with this, or, Dark Mechanicum, or Tagmata, for example, is pretty low, which makes this very, very tough to actually ever get any use out of, really. And, unless this is supposed to be at the start of the game, which it's clearly not by the way it's written, very hard to ever actually get use out of this, so I don't think it's very good, unfortunately. It is worth mentioning, though, that this does mention Dark Mechanicum as a selection choice, which is kind of cool for those of us who are hoping that Dark Mechanicum get rules. So, only really one Warlord trait of use there for the Dark Angels, and it's questionable whether that's a good one. So a lot of the time, you're going to end up taking one of the Warlord traits out of the basic rulebook. Now, that's not too big a problem, because the ones in the basic rulebook are really good anyway, but it is, a little setback for them in that they get a bit less choice than everybody else. So let's go on to their armory, and first we're going to talk about the swords in their armory. They like their swords, do Dark Angels. So they've got the Calibanite Warblade, which is just a power sword with +1 strength. It's a little bit unexciting because power swords generally aren't the greatest choice for power weapons, but, given the synergy it has with the Deathwing trait with +1 to hit and +1 strength, it is actually pretty good. +1 to hit in combat is a pretty good thing, because a lot of the time you're only hitting on 4s or 3s at best, and it's quite hard to come by hitting better than that. Having +1 strength on top with your power swords is cool, if a little bit unexciting. But the real gem for Dark Angels players here, and the thing that people who don't play Dark Angels will be less happy about, is the Tyrannic Greatsword. Now, I and ahed over writing this bullet point as to what to write here, but I think I would be doing an injustice if I didn't call this weapon what it is, which is overpowered, in my opinion. There's not many things I think are genuinely overpowered in this game, but this is one of them. It's +2 strength and AP3 at base, but it's got Rend and Murderous Strike on a 5. There's basically nothing in the game, no other weapon in the game that comes close to being as good as this weapon, especially when you realise that they also get +1 to hit from the Deathwing trait as well, and the units that these go on are often weapon skill 6 on top of that as well. So all these things together, it's not only the best weapon in a vacuum, but the synergy in the army that goes with it is crazy as well. And just as a kicker for everyone who's not a Dark Angels player, it's only the cost of a Power Fist. It doesn't cost, extra points. It's not super expensive. And when you look at what some legions get access to, it's just weird that this weapon's so good. Like a White Scar's Power Glaive is only +1 strength, and it's only got Breach in 5, not Rend in 5, and doesn't have Murderous Strike for the same cost. Like, it's significantly worse. Sons of Horus, Carcer, and Power Axe is 5 points less, but it's got Breach in 5, and it's Strength User. The power side on Death Guard is the same base stats, Strength to AP3, but it's got no Murderous Strike, and it rends on a 6. It does have Reap and Blow, but significantly less good weapon. None of the other weapons in the game come even close to this. It's good against literally every target. It cuts through Space Marines, wounds them on a 2, gives them no save. Against enemy targets of any kind, whether it's Terminators or even things like Galvorback that would normally be harder to instant death, it just kills everything. Great against characters in a duel. There's nothing that this isn't good against. It can even penetrate vehicles, even though it's only a strength 6 weapon. It's got Rend, lots of attacks that are going to hit, and you've got good chance of going through armor as well with it at the same time, although not all armor, but pretty much even armor 14 you can glance and pen just because so many things are going to hit it. It's good against everything. It's got no downsides. It's just a little bit over the top, and you definitely need to be careful with how many of these you use in your army. And while I don't want to make Dark Angels players feel bad for taking these, because they are super cool, they really go with the Paladin thing, they look great on the models that have got them, you do need to just bear in mind that units that are using these are probably going to win most of their combats against other units, regardless of what those units are equipped with. This unit's just going to win because the sword is just so much far in advance of what other people can bring. And then onto the plasma weapons that Dark Angels have got access to. So, one of their themes generally is extra good at plasma, extra good with these plasma artifacts, that kind of stuff. So they got the plasma repeater, which is a 12-inch range plasma gun. It goes down to strength 6, but it gets an extra shot because it's assault 3 and it's twin linked as well. So most plasma guns, sure, you can shoot them at range 24, but you're really going to be trying to get within 12 of them. So this is kind of not a super negative, really, in that case. So 3 shots assault, and it's twin linked. So it's effectively, by the time you factor in the twin link rerolls, this is basically 2 plasma guns worth of hits. It does exactly double the number of average hits for a normal plasma gun, although they're strength 6. So 5 of these is going to kill 2 Terminators or 8 Marines when they shoot. That's double what a plasma gun does. And that's, really, really good. Although, you won't be taking these necessarily all the time, but it is a very powerful option, and a lot of Legions would really love to have access to this. The reason you might not take it all the time is because Dark Angels get the Plasma Burner, which, similarly to the Tyrannic Greatsword, is probably a little bit over the top for what it does. So it's a 10-point upgrade, which is quite pricey. It takes the cost of this on a tactical support squad to 20 points per model, which is very expensive. Potentially too expensive, but Interemptors, one of the special units we'll talk about in the next part of the Dark Angel review, don't actually pay properly for these. They actually pay less than 10 points per plasma gun. They're cheaper than a support squad using normal plasma guns for some reason, so this is one of the reasons these are a bit of a problem. Obviously, because the template weapons, they auto-hit, and they've got render and a plasma profile, so if you get 5 guys with these, and they hit 5 Marines each with a template, which is very, very easy to do. The likelihood is you're going to hit more against most 10-man units. 5's very easy, even if the other person uses a movement reaction to step away from you in the movement phase. As long as you're delivering this unit properly, 5 is the minimum you should be hitting against most units. That will kill 15 to 16 Space Marines. 25 hits, half of which are going to breach. The rest of which are still going to kill a few more Marines. 15 to 16 Space Marines by hitting 5 guys with 5 of these. If you hit 5 Terminators, it's still going to kill 4.5 Terminators, even with their invulnerable saves factored in. There's very little in the game that is great at shooting Terminators. The game has been changed in this edition from previous editions to get rid of all the things that have got mass AP2, all those AP2 templates. And it's made the game great. It's really opened it up. It's meant people can put Space Marines on the table without their opponents just taking them off. This weapon is, I think, the only remaining gun in the game now that actually does just take Space Marines off the table. It's not just good against Space Marines, though. It's good against Terminators. It's good against everything, really, because Plasma's good. Even if you did have to shoot it at a Dreadnought, it'd still do a bit. Whereas, most weapons do nothing. I don't think you take these outside of Interemptors, because obviously they are super expensive, and there's not really any reason not to take the Interemptors with them on. But, if you do have a unit anywhere where you've got a single plasma gun, or you want to try toning these down a little bit, and you've just got some units that have got 1 plasma gun in, putting one of these in a unit with plasma guns is quite cool, and it will make your opponent feel less bad when you just pick all his models up off the table. But that said, even paying 20 points for these, even if you just took a unit of 5 guys, tactical support squads, in a Rhino with plasma burners, they would still make their points back when they shoot something. If they kill 4.5 Terminators, that's pretty much 200 plus points normally against most people who've equipped their Terminators. That's quite a lot, really, to kill. So these are also a little bit good. And I think the fact that Dark Angels get access to both this gun and also the Tyrannic Greatsword as well is, maybe a little bit on the edge of a bit too much in a lot of games. So looking at Stasis Missiles, the last thing they've got, so these are frag missiles basically with concussive instead of pinning and no AP, so they're blast 3 and concussive. Concussive's too weak a rule to be worth it, unfortunately. The enemy unit's got to take a leadership test, which a lot of units are going to pass, and even if it does concuss them, it's only -1 weapon skill, which is great in some situations, but in a lot of situations is kind of worthless as well. It also, because of the way the concussive rule is written, doesn't work in Overwatch either, which is kind of annoying and a little bit of a shame. So these are a bit of a miss and probably not something you're gonna take very much. Then we've got the Paladin of the Hecatonistica. Try saying that 5 times fast. It took me a few reads of that word to figure out that it wasn't actually as hard to pronounce as it looks. So these are 30 points upgrade for a console, which is 5 points cheaper than a champion, a Legion champion. And I say that because the Legion champion also gets weapon skill 6 and a free power weapon, which is a relatively similar upgrade. But this guy gets weapon skill 6 and these leadership 10 and stubborn, which he's going to confer on his unit. And, as I always say, leadership and leadership modifying things are super, super good in Heresy. So being able to give a unit that whilst also bringing a weapon skill 6 guy, who also happens to come with a free Tyrannic Greatsword, is really good. It means that he's going to murder most things in combat. He'll even murder, massive characters, anything, special characters, all the way up to, really big named characters. A weapon skill 6 guy with a Tyrannic Greatsword who strikes at initiatives just got a really good chance of killing pretty much anything. And if he's not doing that, he will quite happily mince whatever else is in combat as well. He gets Adamantium Will 3 as well, which is not, super relevant because Adamantium Will's not that good unless you're a Psyker. But, it's another free thing that the guy gets. It's a brilliant unit leader that'll win most duels and give his unit really good staying power buffs from that leadership stuff as well. And obviously also a great modelling opportunity to make one of these Paladins too. And I think these are a really cool and thematic choice for Dark Angels. So, in summary, a really flexible Legion trait that makes it greater than the sum of its parts. And I think I've seen a lot of people complain that the Dark Angels Legion trait isn't very good. I actually do think it's very good, because it's so flexible and it gets you the right buffs on the right units where you need them to have. They do have a very weak reaction on Warlord Traits, which is, like a double whammy for them. But it's more than made up for by the Tyrannic Greatsword and the Plasma Burner. They are both, arguably, but they are both brokenly good. They're both on the overpowered side for sure. And if you're playing in a non-super serious environment, you really need to consider how many of these you take in your army, because even a couple of units with this kind of stuff can really tip the balance very far and give people some really negative play experiences just because of how silly these are in raw numbers. If you are playing in a more serious environment, of course, this is great for Dark Angels, and you will certainly want to take these things in your army regardless, because the Tyrannic Greatswords in particular are such a cool modelling opportunity, and the models that have got them look so great. Just need to have a think about, getting the right number of them in so you and your opponent can both have great games despite their stats. So that's all for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed the content, please do drop me a like and a subscribe. If you would like to leave me a comment or discuss anything that's been talked about in the episode, please do down below on YouTube. I will see you all soon. Hopefully all the Dark Angels players don't hate me for saying their whole army's broken. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.